Yahoy, we're back to the dry season on Beers with Max. Still broken foot. 9 weeks later. I don't know. They tell me beer is bad for bones, so I'm off it. So I'm not doing it. Keith, you've been very encouraging today. Thank you much. Keith is also experiencing dry season out in where are you dialing in from there, Keith?
I'm in Naples, Florida currently.
Oh man, I don't want to talk about that anymore. You know, I was born in Florida
Yeah, where?
and Jupiter.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, like, Paradise Cove. And then one day my parents were like, "Hey, you like snowboarding, right?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah." "Oh, you like ice hockey, right?" "Yeah, I love ice hockey." And all of a sudden I'm living in New England like a schmuck and
Yeah,
wondering
I
where all
mean,
the beaches are.
speaking of dry season, it is dry season here and warm and sunny. So I don't know if it's similar to what you're dealing with up there, but
No,
in case you're
no, it's
homesick.
no, but it did snow down there, didn't it? Semi recently, like a month ago, it snowed in Florida.
Maybe I wasn't here, but I was
Yeah, why
up in
would you
Maryland.
be?
I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
up I was up in
you only
Maryland
for the.
experiencing that probably.
Well, my dad's still down there. I get down there for golf.
Cool. There
Typically
you go.
right around this time when my foot isn't broken.
There you go.
So missing out on that too. We had an awesome conversation, I don't know, maybe a week ago.
Yeah.
Met each other on LinkedIn as we do, and we got to talking about relationships and how like that's really all we got going for us in agency world or business value or whatever
Yeah.
you're doing. It's all about the relationship. So I'm excited to dive in. We'll start with a softball. What do you do?
I am the co-founder and CEO of O3 World. We're a digital experience consultancy.
Digital experience. Tell me
Yes.
what. How do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, so over the course of our history, we haven't really changed that much. We've kind of just dove in a little bit deeper. So we've been around for 20 years, and we started as a brand communications company. But really, we were balanced between kind of design and technology. Because so even though we said brand communications, we did branding, but we did small websites, web design development back then. We even had our own management software system built in Cold Fusion way back in the day. This is pre WordPress and the open source technologies back then. And then we became a digital agency, and then a digital product agency, and then a customer experience consultancy, and finally, our Goldilocks spot right now, Max, is digital experience consultancy. I mean, but really, ultimately, I mean, we handled digital consulting strategy, experience design, and software development for mostly enterprise organizations. Finance, insurance, manufacturing, healthcare are pretty much are the industries. And the digital experience part, I mean, we're often brought in maybe to look at one particular kind of product or product opportunity. So let's just say, for example, an organization is looking to take a new digital product to market. So we come in and help them with a lot of the research, the market research, the user research and analysis, and then basically kind of building out looking at the pricing structure and model, competition, et cetera, and then looking for how to position them, and then build out a prototype, and then take it to market, and then we often become that product team. And so we either sometimes get in that spot, or maybe it's an enterprise website of sorts, something along those lines. And the experience part is we try to then navigate inside the organization and understand the customer journey that these clients, their customers are experiencing, and then where are those drop-offs along that journey, and where are there digital touch points and opportunities to kind of improve that journey. So long-winded way of kind of expressing what we
Yeah.
do and where we've
Well,
come from.
I would imagine. So now I get why we had such a conversation about relationships
Yeah.
because I would imagine that it is next to impossible to do what you're doing without strong relationships across a myriad of departments. I mean, you're talking about marketing, you're talking about sales, formal product departments, any designers that get their little claws in the mix,
Absolutely.
ops. Like, is there anybody that you don't have to talk to and align with when you're building digital products?
It's a good question. I mean, so typically most common is, and you mentioned some of the roles. I'd say marketing and technology are really kind of, so it might be a CMO, it might be a CTO that kind of brings us into the conversation. We really kind of have to be validating for both of them. We've got to help. We're kind of like bridge the gap. I mean, traditionally marketing and technology companies don't get along so great. I mean, divisions inside organizations. So since we kind of speak to the design and creative side, the marketing side, and we kind of speak to the engineering side, we end up being kind of a good kind of go-between for those departments. So they are two kind of departments and kind of titles. As you get a little bit more nuanced and specific inside larger organizations, you might have chief digital officers or chief product officers, chief experience officers, things of that nature. Um, and then and then recently, we've been doing actually quite a bit of AI consulting and strategy. And in that case, we're actually working a lot on the operations side because we're helping with some kind of operational efficiencies or operational, I guess, inefficiencies and trying to create efficiencies by the use of by the use of AI. So we wouldn't normally deal with the operations side, but recently that's been a new one for us.
Yeah. I'm working with an agency right now doing some similar things, and their biggest challenge is getting design and development to talk to each other, which from an outside
Exactly.
perspective is like, what do you mean? But I'm hearing stories of, these larger organizations going into a workshop, and the head of design goes, nice to meet you. Like it's the first time they're actually meeting after years of working together, design and development. I mean, are you experiencing that? And is this like the fault of someone that exists that is supposed to make sure the left and the right hand work
It,
together?
it's a great question. So I think silos still exist, and I think being in a remote workforce, I think only kind of magnifies that,
Yeah, but this
amplifies
isn't
that
like
maybe.
this shouldn't be like this isn't like marketing and sales where they're like
Yeah,
ultimate enemies.
which is
I
even
don't know.
weirder. Which is even weirder, by the way, that marketing sales are enemies. But
I
um,
No, that's not weird to me at all. Maybe because that's where I live, right? So
right,
I'm like, oh,
exactly.
I know why.
It's interesting. I mean, so way back in the day, if you're talking just like product development, web development, and so you used to be able to build things in a waterfall approach, where it's like you're going to you're going to design this thing, and you're going to throw it over the fence to somebody, and it could be in your organization, it could be an agency, it could be another country, and they would kind of build out the kind of back end technology. I think just in general these days, the world that we're in, the technology is way more dynamic, and that's why Agile exists. I mean, you have a general framework as where you want to go over the course of a week, a month, 6 months or whatever it might be. But just that constant collaboration is, more imperative than ever. I mean, you can't, and we've had this back in the day when we've worked with agencies or design companies that would be come up with this great idea and then they'd give it to us. I'm like, you can't build this thing. Like, so it's like I
Yeah,
don't. It looks great, but this isn't an ad. This
yeah.
is
This
this
is
is
what
a
happened with the
dynamic.
Cybertruck. They were like, "Are you kidding me?"
Right,
And then like
exactly. So
somehow they're just gonna pull it off.
so does it shock me? Yes, it still does shock me that the kind of the right hand's not speaking to the left. I think that's probably maybe one of the values of being a consultancy to try to break down some of the political silos and some of the just and them just not being on the same page.
Well, because you can't. I noticed that you had a change in identity
Yes.
from agency to consultancy, and
Yeah.
that's generally the case for doing so because an agency is thoroughly ingrained in vendor town, and
Correct.
you don't invite vendors to make decisions because obviously the decision is going to be we should do more design or we should do more development. But in that consultancy layer, it's like, look, I don't care who's doing design, the development, but like I will say they should talk to each other. And there doesn't
Absolutely.
seem to be a cadence here. There doesn't seem to be, governance is. You probably use the word governance.
Yeah. Sometimes
I
sure.
love that word. It's just like you mean like how you're going to do something, right? It's like
Right.
yeah, the governance is a good word. Anyway, sort of on a buzzword bingo thing going
Parking
here. But
lot.
yeah,
That's
I
a
think
good
it's
one.
fascinating
Parking
that
lot's good corporate buzzword bingo.
yeah, they're the pros. Yeah, they're the pros, but I do think technology is one step behind. The danger of technology buzzwords is they're important though. Like nobody misses a marketing buzzword.
Yeah. Right.
What happened to my ABM campaign? It's like nobody notices.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But if the CISO falls asleep and you have a security breach, like people are going to find out. So
Yeah. Pretty
I
quickly.
think they're
Yeah.
much more dangerous on
Yeah.
the
Absolutely. Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
technology side.
Yeah.
Um,
Which actually brings up a good point. I think that's historically one of the reasons why technology and marketing or design or whatever don't really get along so well because I think technologists are very understandably secure and careful about the data that they are governing. And so I think that they're afraid if they give access to a design or marketing department or consultancy agency, whatever it might be, that they might lose a little bit of that, control. It might not be part of inside their infrastructure anymore. And so therefore, they're just kind of unwilling to be kind of open-minded and creative on kind of different approaches.
So how do you? I mean, we started off today by talking about what we really got along with a week ago, which is that relationships are most important. Like
Yep,
I don't care
yep,
what you're building, the building of things always going to get easier, always going to get cheaper. Like
yep.
us. But like right now, hey, great stuff. But the relationship is always going to be most important. So how do you break down some of these barriers and navigate the silos?
It's really really important, as you said, Max. It's something that I try to personally spend a lot of time and culturally is something that I try to encourage. I think it's I referenced before kind of the remote nature of things. I do think that you obviously can certainly do work and be productive sort of like remotely. Obviously all of us are. But I think that the ability to be in front of people sometimes just goes much farther. So, for example, you and I mean, you're in your home, your office, whatever you are. I'm in mine. We're sort of on, in Zoom environment, whatever. But we're not sharing the environment. We're sharing basically, we're sharing screen together. But if we were having like beers, for example, like at a bar or a restaurant, we would be experiencing the environment around us. We'd be experiencing something that went in the corner, something that adds to that moment, that relationship. And additionally, what's going to happen is we might talk about, this interview, for example, but I'm sure pre-interview, post-interview, we'll talk about family, we'll talk about relationships, we'll talk about this thing that's bothering you in your other line of work or something along those lines. And I think in those kind of like off moments, I think one, you get to know people a little bit more intimately. So then it's like, oh, you play tennis? Oh, great, I play tennis. Like we should get together and play tennis or something along those lines. You look for those little opportunities. Or it just might be something you hear like, oh, I've been looking for, sorry I'm late. I was dealing with my financial advisor. I can't stand this financial advisor. Oh, I know a financial advisor I can help you with. At the end of the day, it's like providing, and you brought this up. You referenced the consultancy. It's providing value beyond the production level of what you're delivering. I mean, to your point, you can do a lot of people can do this work, and they can do it, rather well. And you can be productive, as everybody says. I'm as productive as I am at home as I am, in the office with other people, etc. And to do certain tasks, I completely agree. You're sometimes actually more productive. But in terms of really building that rapport and relationship, I think it just takes, it's a little bit more nuanced, and I think it takes a little bit more time and effort to get to know somebody. So we do try to go above and beyond. I mean, sometimes you can't always do it in person, but we really do try to find ways where we can do it in person with them and find other values, not just like, I'm going to go meet with the client and go take them for a drink or something along those lines. I mean, that's the typical way, and that's sometimes great. But provide other value to them in some regard. So, for example, we did this conference last year, so we've done it to 2 years. We're doing it again this year, called the 1682 Conference. It's an AI and innovation conference. But, one of the things that we heard from people that have come to it is they really appreciate the other people that are there. I mean, they love the content, but they really appreciate the whole day, like, the location of it, the food setup, where the cocktail reception is, and the curated nature of the other people that are there. So then they're looking at us, Max, like we don't get paid to do events, but they're like, wow, O3 invited me to this awesome event where I learned a bunch of things and I met all of these new people. And so then you're just kind of increasing the value of the relationship that you have there, and it becomes less transactional. So there's a variety of ways we can all do it, but I think it's really, really critical to understand and to get to know somebody on a more, on a deeper level. Because you mentioned vendor. I remember we were in client account meetings years ago, and one of our project managers would say, I'm waiting for client. And I said, listen, the client has a name. If you say, I'm waiting for client, they're going to say, I expect from vendor. And so the exact scenario you used, I used in meetings before. I was like, Max has a name. And if you look at him as just a client, they're going to treat you just like a vendor. So get to know Max a little bit more. And, they're going to want to work with you. I mean, at the end of the day, people are like, B2B business, whatever. the people are involved. You still want to work with good people, people that you like. You want to give them business. You want to have conversations with them. I mean, even if they do good work and they're not good people, or you don't enjoy being on the phone with them, or hanging out with them, that's really going to ruin the relationship.
Yeah, yeah. I think I've been talking about this a lot. I think there's a deeply ingrained identity crisis happening in every professional. I don't care what you're doing, but any professional service, people are very confused. It's like, the movie 300.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was just like a millennial thing, but it was like really popular for me.
yeah,
And how you remember how they asked the other, like the weak troops, like, "Hey, what's your profession?" And the guy's like, "I'm a cook," and all the Spartans are like, "Ugh," which basically meant they're like, we're professional badasses.
yeah.
That's kind of what's going on in professional service world. You ask people and they're like, "Oh, I develop products and I design interfaces." It's like that is entirely besides the point. You are here to add value to your clients.
Yeah.
It's like a server at a restaurant. Like I was a server at a restaurant.
Me too.
You don't say like, "Oh, I bring people food."
Yeah,
Not at the nice places. You're like, well, I'm there to give them the best experience possible. And when I ask some of my questions, I don't know what they're gonna say,
Yeah.
and so I just think people have I think it's the way that they were brought up in school. Like we're told do this and you get the reward.
yeah.
Not to ask why or give our teacher a better experience. So anyway, I think people are confused, and it's all about adding value to the client. And if you don't have a strong relationship, you're not going to be able to add value because they're holding all the keys.
They are, yeah. And how do you change the conversation in some regard? I mean, that's really the key of getting in there. And sometimes you're right. I mean, getting in there, you're just kind of selling yourself in the same way that we kind of all do in this space. But then how are you kind of continuing to add value to the relationship beyond it being just the work that we do? It's hard because people are, they have short attention spans. We all have short attention spans. There's a lot of things grabbing our attention overall. And there's a lot of noise in the market. There's a lot of service companies out there that say they can do, they all sound very, very similar. And so the only way, not the only way, but one of the few ways that I think is really kind of separates you, to your point, is how are you building the relationship, and how are you building that trust amongst other people?
Yeah, and it's measurable.
It is measurable.
Measurable because you can't just magically get access to other budget holding decision makers. You have to have a strong relationship with your point of contact for them to trust and unlock those other avenues. So I think you can measure the value of relationships in a lot of ways, one of which is how many budget holding decision makers show up on a regular basis, to quarterly business reviews. Or I love what you've done with the conference there, because it essentially serves the strategic value of a quarterly business review.
Yep.
FaceTime with people that make decisions about money, because you never know you never know what they're going to decide or what's going on in your life. So you just need that environment and a comfortable environment where they can talk about stuff that you're not going to hear.
Well, and the other thing that it does is it kind of validates you either as an individual or as a company. So, for example, if they go to the conference and they see, like, they start to meet other clients of ours, and they're like, wow, I didn't realize you guys work with, so and so and so and so. Or they see this speaker that's someone that they might follow on LinkedIn, or they might listen to their podcast, and someone like very reputable. So it completely all of a sudden takes you and puts you in like another kind of sphere, and that's just reality. They say it all the time, like, oh, you work with Nike? Wow, that's a big deal. You work with Nike. If you work with Nike, then certainly I trust you. And so that is another piece of it that comes from it as well. And it is sort of in a roundabout way selling. I mean, we're selling our culture, we're selling our value, but we're not doing it in a direct way. Like, hey, Max, look at all these great brands I work with. Look at all the great work I do. Look at all these great testimonials. It's a more organic way to build it.
It doesn't have that stink of desperation.
Exactly. Right, right.
I would always, I came to call that credibility by association.
Yeah.
I went out on my own when I was 23. And prior to that, I had the credibility of my organization and my business partners who had, gray hair. So I was the gunslinging kid, but I had a gray hair sitting with me, and they're like, "Yeah, no, he's the guy."
Totally.
So when I went out on my own, I was like, "Oh shit, I need some credibility." So wouldn't you know it, just started interviewing people that had the credibility, inviting them to my equivalent was Beers with Max Live, which I still do. I'll bring somebody really credible,
Mm-hmm.
multi micro famous author people,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd bring everyone in my pipeline to this big Zoom call,
Cool.
and they're just sitting there looking at me, looking at this other person, going credibility by association. I don't
Yep, it
even
really is.
talk. So
No.
that's what these conferences are doing and creating
Yep.
these experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that also, it's just a lot of it. I do think that we are, many of us are just kind of geared and used to the fact that, like, okay, we have a half an hour conversation to talk about this project. Let's just like jam as much as we can in and talk about this project. Whereas we don't really give a lot of like time, as I said, one, to get to know one another, but also just to listen. I mean, those listening skills are so important. I mean, in life, in any relationship, in a personal relationship, or certainly a business one as well. So because then you're able to show maybe a little bit of empathy. Because at the end of the day, I mean, you made a great point about it's understanding. You know what? Not really what I do or my company does. More, what are your pain points? Like, what are your business pain points? What are your issues? And then let me see how I can help. And I said this all the time, and this is why we've made a conscious decision to call ourselves more of a consultancy. Oftentimes we'll talk to whatever the decision maker as an organization is, and we'll find out that we can help them with maybe 60% of what they need. But there might be a specific technology platform or a particular capability, whatever it might be, that we can't. So, but we also know other people like yourself and other, we just talked about the crew that you introduced me to this morning. And that's where you show the additional value that, look, I'm not just here just to make money off of you. I'm actually trying to build a real honest, truthful sort of relationship here with you and show value beyond just my company and you just hiring us. And in many cases, Max, we've gotten business by saying no first. Like, they'd contact us and be like, "You guys, we want you to consider doing this with us." And I appreciate that. We don't do that kind of work. So I can tell you some other companies, and then months down the road, a year down the road, whatever it might be, they came back and they've said that as an example. I really appreciate that you did not try to pitch that work because that's not what you do. And, you gave us a couple of recommendations, so whether they went with them or they didn't, they at least appreciate the effort. So,
Yeah, it's just trust. It's trust there. You didn't go after me. So many organizations do that, and they've. It's not their first time hiring a vendor, so they've been around the
yeah.
like, oh yeah, we need somebody to do this. Vendor goes, oh, we can do that, and you're like, are you sure? you know,
Yeah, I never understood that. This is like the old school, almost like ad model of like, we're all
well,
one stop
it's a
shop.
full service thing.
Yeah, I mean,
There's like
listen,
a
you
thing
can't
that
be full
happens.
serviced anymore. I mean, it's just that it's too fractured. I mean, the
Yeah,
service world is too fractured. I mean, you've got SEO companies that have 150 people, and that's all they do. So I don't know how you can be 100 people and you can do absolutely everything. It's just not. It's not
it
reasonable. So I've never believed in the fact of like you say yes and figure it out later. I really don't feel comfortable with that. I mean, they're spending a considerable amount of money with us. I'd rather be very honest with them. Like, I'm familiar with that. We've done a little bit of that. Like, if you want to go in on this and take a little bit of a risk, a shared risk, all about it. But I just want you to know exactly where we stand. Where I think to
yeah.
your point, a lot of people are like, "Oh, we can do that," and then what ends up happening most of the time is they take on something that they're not that good at, and it eventually the person sees that they're not very good at it, and so they lose that reputation and that relationship because of it. So
My favorite way to handle that is I love to answer your question. Everything I'm about to say is for entertainment purposes only. Is that okay? And they're like, yeah. And then I give like a very articulate answer. They're like, wow. I'm just, hey, don't take my advice. I
right,
don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, back to the stuff I am an expert at. Let's design
yeah, yeah,
some service growth. But
yep,
I want to get back to something you mentioned about giving people the space or giving people the time to do it. First off, I'm curious if you would agree that charging people with delivering project on time, delivering scope on time, and expanding relationships or forwarding relationships. I see a lot of problems with that. Like to the point where I just want to tell my clients, like, hey, don't do that. Like, let's just start with that's a bad idea. Because I think both are so critical that if you give it to the same person one will win over the other when both are necessary. Like you need to deliver on scope, and you need to be thinking about uh, expanding the relationship. And it's like, when you get home at the end of a long day of work, it's like you don't have the energy, you don't have the passion for,
Yeah.
your kids or your hobby. That's what you do on the weekend. So I do think it requires a splitting of those roles. Would you agree with that, or have you had success?
So I would, and I'll give a couple of examples. I think it's nuanced, and you have to be careful. So, for example, there was, and this may have been 7, 8 years or so ago, we had created an account management layer, and it actually helped expand our business quite considerably, which was great. But if you don't have the right person, what the client on the other end started to feel like, it's like, oh, I never see Max in any meeting. So if Max is here, I know he's about to pitch me something. So
Mm,
you also have to be
charge it up.
careful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you also have to be careful that you're not, you're again providing value beyond just I'm here to like just give you a statement of work and pitch something else. I
Yeah.
mean, I totally agree with you. I don't think that there should be one person, one role that should be responsible for delivering it on time, and in scope, whatever else, and that person also is going to be basically responsible for kind of expanding the account. That said, I do think there's a lot of value if everybody that is interacting with the client has the same kind of growth mentality, the same relationship mentality. They may not be the one putting the statement of work together. They might not even be the one suggesting the idea. And this has happened actually, and I wish it would happen more. But in some cases, like for example, a designer working with a client, like they'll bring up, I heard them mention that they're having a real challenging part with this, or they're thinking about, kind of doing a deeper dive in analytics on that. Like it came up in the conversation, then using that and then giving it to the appropriate person so they can bring that up in a conversation. I think that's honestly where agencies miss quite a bit, and us as well sometimes. I mean, I think that people get a little too siloed in their role, Max. Like it's like, well, I'm just an engineer and I'm just going to do this work and kind of get it out the door and get it on time, and the client's going to love me for it. But I do think at least be thinking a little bit of sales orientation and understand. I mean, that's just being a little bit more attached to the culture of the organization. I mean, our best clients, and I think most people would agree with this, are ones you've had for a long time. We've had some clients for over 12 years. And that's because of, it's certainly not one product, it's not one project. It's multiple over the course of time because they now trust us over time. And I think the people on those accounts recognize the value of that relationship, and they've now been working with these clients. I mean, there's not many people at our company that have been there 12 years, but a few have. Others maybe 3 years, but they really appreciate that. So the ideal part is, yes, have people specialized in their roles in certain things, but I do think that having a willingness or an understanding as to what growth looks like and the objective for your agency or consultancy with the client at the end of the day, I think is really important.
Yeah. I agree with that. I was talking with somebody and they made the argument, hey, we've got, there's some people that are role players. You got Billy. He's
Yep.
really into design. He's not a big people person. He's not going to be thinking about expanding the relationship. I said, no. I think it's like culture. Any coach or consultant that's worth a damn is going to say, look, you need people that align with your culture. And not just because you can't get the same value out of 99% of your people. You can, but any one person that doesn't align with that, has a different mindset, it's just there to do their job, that mindset bleeds into other people,
Yeah, it totally
and
does.
it starts to take over. It's like, well, he's not on board, so I'm not really on board either. I'll just do my job.
So I'll give a short little story on culture, kind of how it's changed for us quite considerably pre and post pandemic. So before the pandemic, we were all full time in house team members. We didn't really have fractional people. We didn't have contractors. We didn't do offshore. We did none of it, and we did everything in house as a team. Then you kind of move towards post pandemic. So now obviously everything gets table gets flipped on its head, and everyone's scattered all over the place. So we now have a remote workforce. I mean, we still have an office, and there's some people that come to that office up in Philadelphia. But we have people remotely, all over the country. We also have some full-time people. We have some fractional people. We have some contractors we flex up and down, and we have 3 offshore teams that we work with as well. But the point I'm getting to is we really wanted to have this team that was like that felt part of the team, and we were willing to pay extra for them to be part of the team. But as you've seen now, things have changed. Now people are, as you said, that Billy's kind of the soldier, just wants to like work, doesn't
I
want
don't
to.
know why. I got nothing against Billy's.
Yeah. I don't even know if
But
I
today it
know
was
Billy.
Billy.
Yeah, but but
Usually Timmy, to be honest.
you start you start looking at it, and it's like, okay, you don't want to come into the office, you don't want to interact with the client, you don't want to manage people, and honestly, Mass, what then comes in my head, it's like, okay, well then, why should you be a full time employee versus maybe one of these contractors or these fractionals or offshore people? It just becomes like the value you're bringing to the organization, and it's a cultural thing. If you just want to be a soldier and you don't want to be part of like anything else, like you just kind of want to literally clock in, clock out, be
Contractor,
done,
sure.
and that's it. I mean, that's fine. But really, you then, and I'm not the only one that feels this way. Employers start looking at it as like, what's the real value you're bringing here? That I'm paying this full time salary, these benefits, all these other things, and you don't really want to kind of go the extra mile at all. So it's no different. The client relationship or the employee relationship. I think it's understanding how do we all part of something that we can help scale together, and if it scales, then we all kind of benefit together. And I still think that we're missing that as service companies as a whole.
Well, we're in the year of 25 now. It's
Yes.
February. It's freezing.
What are you talking about? It's warm down here.
Well, anyway, I was thinking you're in the Philly area, but yeah, it's anyway. I got to get back to Florida, but so now that you've got this cultural change done, I mean, what's on your? I assume you do some annual planning? Are you like an EOS shop or
We're not.
OKRs? What's your flavor of strategic planning? Do you not have one?
No, we do. We don't do EOS. No, we do. I mean, we have a leadership team. We do a lot of planning towards the end of the year, and do have OKRs for sure as an organization, as an SLT team, and then obviously more specifically kind of department oriented and such.
Yeah.
So no, we spend quite a bit of time doing that.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean that you don't plan. I just
Yeah.
meant like, do you follow a particular religion, or do I
Ah,
have the
yes.
freedom to,
We
I want
we
to use the right
we're
language.
agnostic. We're agnostic.
Yeah, we're
Business process agnostic.
yeah, right, exactly. It's so weird that there's like factions, like that, because you get like I'll be talking to some people and they're like, oh yeah, we don't, we're on the OKR thing.
Yeah,
And
and listen,
I accidentally say like rocks or something, and they're very judgmental.
dude, it's like a cult. Some of this stuff works for people. EOS is a perfect example, and they all have like different names, like the integrator or whatever. That it's a little bizarre to me. And I've worked with companies, I've worked with leaders that use that, and in some regards, I think it keeps them, provides like structure for them. In other cases, I'm like, this is bananas. Like you've actually created like too much structure. There it's like, well, I'm the CEO, but I can't actually give input because I'm not the integrator or whatever. Again, all the terminology. So
I think they're the same people that need CrossFit in order to exercise.
sure,
It's
yeah.
like, look, you could just exercise, like it's good for you, and they're like, no, I couldn't do it without this crazy regiment and cult and
Yep.
the DVDs.
Look. I mean, to each their own. I mean, I'm not that. I'm not rigid in general about really sort of anything in my life, whether it's business or otherwise. We absolutely do have goals and plans. I've always said I've been a fan of like the 18-month business plan, versus I was at an agency only event years ago, and an agency up in Canada had a 20-year plan. And it was like a 30-person agency, a 20-year plan. So it's funny. I saw him like 4 or 5 years later, and I go, "How's that plan working?" He's like, "It is absolutely does not exist anymore." So I try to be a little bit more opportunistic, a little bit more
Yeah.
spontaneous, a little bit more open to adaptability. And I think it's one of the benefits of obviously being a smaller, kind of a nimble company
Yeah.
as well to be able to do
Well,
so.
I digress. It was sort of the wrong question. I mean, it's great. Yes, we're on planning. I guess
Yep.
my question was like,
Yep.
where do you see the opportunity here in 25 for an agency? Because you got culturally, it sounds like you got people on board with growth. So
Yeah.
Is there like a particular opportunity? Is there another thing that you're focused on? Like, what are you excited about?
You know, first of all, I'm excited for the markets to open a little bit. I feel that there's been a lot of paralysis and a lot of leaders at all sorts of different organizations for a variety of reasons. I mean, some of it's they're doing reorgs, so letting the dust settle as to getting people back in the right spots. Obviously, there's been massive budget cuts, or there's been just layoffs. And I think that the disruption of AI, and in many ways, is great. I think it's been beneficial to us, and I'll get back to that in a second. But also, I think it's challenging because it's not like, oh, we all need to put money in like this platform. People know they have to get involved in AI, but they're just not really sure because honestly, it's moving at such a extraordinarily dizzying pace. So there's a lot of paralysis, and they're taking like little bites or like little swings versus big swings, and obviously the budgets are kind of reacting accordingly with that. So for us, I mean, a lot of companies have, but we kind of got involved a couple years ago with AI when OpenAI kind of came out, and we've gotten a lot of strategic opportunities through that. Not the enormous scale of retainers that we're used to, but really, really nice opportunities of strategy, prototyping, inside innovation groups, inside operations groups, as that we had mentioned as well. And so it's getting us in the door and getting us basically like our client roster is much larger than it's ever been. Our pipeline is much larger than it's ever been. The revenue per client is much smaller than it's ever been. So the opportunity, I think, is again to try to going back to what you started this conversation with, relationships. We now have way more relationships. To how do we expand? How do we provide value? AI was the door in, which was great because it's a nice like wedge offering that allows them to be like, oh, I can try a taste of this, and I can tell all the other board members and executives that we tried it. But then you're able to also impress upon them who you are and the value of the relationship you provide and the other work that you provide as well. So I like that, and then extending upon it. I mean, as I told you, the 1682. There's a lot of noise. There's just so many service companies, Max. I mean, it's remarkable how many there are, and whether you have large ones, you have obviously specialized ones, or you have people that are like, you know what, I've done enough working for a big consultancy, I'm going to start my own. So you've got one or two person ones. So it's really, really hard again to stand out. The 1682 has helped us because it's provided sort of a thought leadership lane for us. And we're expanding it to more of a series now this year. So in addition to the one big signature event for about 150 people, which is going to be in the fall, we're going to do some more micro events. We're also part of a big business organization in Philadelphia called PACT. And one of their signature events, I mean, all they do is throw large technology events in Philadelphia, and we get a little sliver out of that for the 1682 brand. So again, it's providing value kind of over here that aligns with the kind of clients that we have or the kind of relationships we want to have. And it gives us another opportunity to kind of, again, not being like, hey, I'm going to contact you because we can take your next big product to market. I'm maybe going to contact you because I want you to be a speaker at 1682. It changes the whole paradigm of the relationship. You're immediately offering value and not really asking for too much in return. I mean, yes, they're speaking, and that's a value they're providing, but you're giving them kind of you're showcasing them, you're spotlighting them. So I really like that kind of like brand as we're trying to continue to expand that, and then that aligned with kind of the work that we do and kind of like make sure that it's working hand in hand. Personally, I mean that's kind of what I'm most excited about.
So there's a nuance that I just want to call out that
Sure.
I like. I think this is what's going on with your conference, but like I'm always trying to ask people like if they're marketing, okay, how many conversations do you have with your clients that have nothing to do with marketing? That's a signal of relationship. So I
Yep.
noticed you didn't call this conference product development summit or O3's design, summer design bonanza. I believe 1682 is in reference to Philadelphia being founded. Is that right?
Dude, good for you. There's people
No,
that
I
are.
looked it up on my phone.
Oh, well, hey, still,
I'm
still
like,
great
what
for
the hell
you.
are you talking about?
I know people that have been part of the planning of it and didn't know what it stood for. So that's exactly what it's about. Yes.
Yeah. So, but the point is, it's like in that spirit, I think it's more about community. It's more about meeting people. It's sharing knowledge. It's not like overtly, these conference inbound, come to
Yep.
Boston and have a shove product down your throat. It's like,
It really is, and I think that's what has stood out from the sponsors that have sponsored this past year, and again the speakers and the attendees. They really felt that there was something very unique, and we very intentionally also made it small. I mean, under 150 people, so let's say there's 135 people or so. That's nice. That's manageable. You know, you feel like it's not overwhelming. You can have conversations with everybody. You can be in all the sessions because we only do like one stage, and everyone's kind of in there with that shared experience the whole time. Now, if you were to look at it from a financial model standpoint, it's a terrible model. I mean, you need to have to make money on events. You have to get either a tremendous amount of money in sponsorship or sell a ton of tickets. And that model isn't, it's not this one. We lose money on it, but the value it brings to the community overall is again, I think it comes back to us. And as an example of it, Max, I mean, we do this venture awards where we specifically have this past year where we have small companies that make under $500,000 in annual revenue that are leveraging AI in some capacity, that they basically pitched us to be considered from the top three, and then the top three presented day of to the audience, and they all had I think 10 minutes to present, and we gave a winner, and they got $5,000. But more importantly, I mean, they presented to a community of a lot of C-suite executives. Now, it doesn't really benefit us. I mean, we're not going to get work from somebody who's making $200,000 for the new product company, but it is really community. It's like, hey, listen, I'm going to put a spotlight to these awesome little companies in the Philadelphia area that are really super innovative that you probably haven't heard of before, because I haven't heard of it before. And again, we get nothing out of it other than giving them a stage and then connecting them with the other investors or the other people there, in the audience. And so again, totally separate, more or less. I mean, complementary, but pretty much on the side of the work that we do or the work that we would get paid to do, but still a value nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean the only reason to do it is to strengthen relationships and provide value outside of what you're doing. Well, I really appreciate it. People that get through these full episodes, they appreciate it. If you're
I
listening,
appreciate if people get through the full episode.
well, it's 2025. I don't think they are, and like I'd be worried about them if they did. Because it's like, what else are you?
You got
What
nothing
else
else
are you
going on?
doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got 43 minutes, really? Like, I would at least think that they double speeded this.
Yeah, yeah.
So I
That's
try to
fair.
talk a bit slower, controlled pauses. But anyway, for those of you out there, yeah, awesome. If you're binging on Beers with Max, don't operate any heavy machinery. Tip your waitress. See you next time.